Are you in the market for the best graphics card under $200 here in 2020, and you're interested in how well it runs games like Fortnite and Call of Duty Warzone at 1080p, then be sure to stick around because we are benchmarking, testing, and taking a comprehensive look at MSI's GTX 1650 Super to really see if it's the best budget graphics card here in late 2020. Let's jump into it. But if this is your first time to the channel and you want to learn more about building PCs and other gaming related stuff, click the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss a thing. What's happening, YouTube and the internet? Terrence here, and we are back inside the lab and exploring that new price to performance value with MSI's GTX 1650 Super. And so if you're anything like me, which if you're not, that's perfectly fine too, but you like getting the most value for your money, aka the best bang for your buck. And since we're all about that here on the channel and more, we are taking a comprehensive look at NVIDIA's GTX 1650 Super to see how well the MSI Gaming X variant cools, lights, and most importantly, games. And so quickly going over the specs, the NVIDIA GTX 1650 Super has 1,280 CUDA cores, a base frequency of 1,530 MHz, and a max boost or turbo frequency of 1,725 MHz. 4 GB of ultra-fast GDDR6 video RAM, which runs at 12 gigabits per second on a 128 memory interface and a bandwidth of 192 gigabytes a second, and a 100-watt power draw, which means you can run with a relatively low watt power supply. And that is something we're going to measure and test, the load wattage from the wall, that is, thanks to my new favorite tool here in the lab, the Coolman Watt Meter. So we are once again looking to our X470 setup for today's benchmarks, which has a Ryzen 5 1600X and 16 gigabytes of Corsair RAM running at a 2933 MHz XMP. And with that aside, let's get the GTX 50 Super installed on our test setup and running some games. overclocking. And now I know it's not for everyone, but I personally enjoy overclocking my hardware. It's something about the gamble of getting those extra frames or unlocking extra performance. So with that said, how well did the GTX 1650 Super overclock? Let's find out. And so I was able to dial in an overclock of plus 200 on the core and plus 400 on the memory. And that's plus 200 on top of the GPU boost overclock, which was about 1930 megahertz, and already plus 200 megahertz overclock with its factory max turbo of 1725 megahertz for a total overclock of about plus 400 on the core and plus 400 on the memory overclock. And that was stable in the games we tested, with the overclock providing a 3 to 5% boost in performance, or here in Firestrike where we scored 10,518 points at stock, or with the GTX 50 Super reaching a max turbo of 1920 megahertz and 11,166 points with the overclock. And now, yes, there are a few downsides to overclocking your components, especially your GPU, but it's all about mitigating those risks and having a firm grasp or understanding of what it is you're actually doing. Like taking into consideration that when you're overclocking, you're actually adding more power or increasing the amount of power the system's going to draw. For example, with our Ryzen system, which is running at stock minus a 2933 megahertz XMP, hit about 176 watts at stock, and then with our overclock on the GPU, topped out at about 191 watts, which pushed the power draw just a little higher. So tell me down in the comment section below if you overclock your components. I'm eager to know, and I take the time to respond to each and every one of your comments, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of the creation process, engaging with members in the community. Well, that is next to editing. I like doing that too. But going back and looking at how well the GTX 1650 Super handled the games tested here today, the Turin GPU had some really solid performance numbers with its $189 price tag, averaging close to 240 FPS in Fortnite with really good minimums and 1% lows, maybe even suitable for a 120 or 144 Hz monitor if you're interested in the competitive scene. And then Call of Duty Warzone, which too saw competitive frames at about 125 FPS on average with really good minimums. 1% lows could have been better, but they did stay close enough to 60 on average, making the dips less noticeable. And the same could be said with Apex Legends, which came in averaging competitive frames at 120 FPS in the minimums and 1% lows, all hanging around the high 90s on average. And then in graphically demanding games like Ghost Recon Breakpoint and Far Cry New Dawn, both maintain averages of over 70 FPS and nearly the same minimums and 1% lows at around 60. And these benchmarks were all at 1920 by 1080p with combinations of medium to high settings in those games. So even though we were limited to 4 GB of VRAM, we were still able to enjoy a little bit of eye candy. And on the subject of cooling and noise, the GTX 50 Super reached a maximum temperature of about 63 to 64 degrees C during our gaming benchmarks. And this was with the ambient temperature in the area I test in hitting about 27 degrees C. Which, speaking of temps, take a listen to the fans at auto. I know, right? And then take a listen to the fans set to 60%. And now, just in case you live in an area that gets hot often or it stays hot often, take a listen to the fans set to 80%. Cool, calm, and collective. And that was pretty much my experience with the GTX 1650 Super, which for a card that's coming in at just a little under 200 USD, it has a premium aesthetic and build. It's getting the job done at 1080p. It's quiet and also has a little bit of bling to it. You may only have 4 gigabytes of VRAM, but it's going to run and play all of today's modern games with no problem at all at 1080p medium to high settings. And if you want more context on this particular product, jump down to the basement and check out the Amazon link. That way you can shop or learn more about MSI's GTX 1650 Super. For more PC hardware tech tips and tricks, jump to either of the two playlists on your screen and join our community by tapping the round subscribe icon down at the bottom. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and go. Thanks for giving this one a watch. I hope to catch you on the next one. So until then, be easy.